Listen, if you're going to survive at the Galactic Learning Institute on Nexus Prime, you need to understand one fundamental rule. Stay in your lane. Prey species sit on the left side of the cafeteria. Predators claim the right. Humans? Well, humans get the awkward middle section because, apparently, the galaxy still hasn't figured out what to do with a species that's simultaneously too aggressive to be prey and too squishy to be proper predators. The cafeteria itself was a monument to paranoia. A massive hall spanning 3 football fields with enough space to fit 2,000 students from 800 different worlds. Holographic barriers hummed between sections, not quite solid enough to stop someone determined, but present enough to remind everyone, we don't trust each other. Not really. Sure, everyone smiled and nodded during interspecies cooperation lectures, but come lunchtime, the masks came off, and species clustered with their own kind like magnetic particles sorting themselves out. Freya had been attending Nexus Prime for 2 cycles now, studying xenobiology because apparently she hated having a simple life. She'd grown used to the stares, the whispers, the way conversations died when she walked past certain tables. Humans were still the new kids on the galactic block, barely 3 generations into space travel, and most alien species looked at them like unpredictable wild cards. Too emotional, too impulsive, too human. Which was exactly why, on that particular afternoon, Freya was sitting alone at table 63, unwrapping her homemade lunch while the rest of the cafeteria buzzed with the controlled chaos of 1,000 different species trying not to start an interstellar incident over lunch seating. Her sandwich was simple, actual Earth wheat bread, because she'd paid an absurd amount of credits to have it shipped from home, real turkey, lettuce that was only slightly wilted, and mustard. Next to it sat apple slices, already browning at the edges despite the preservation film, and a small container of chocolate chip cookies her mom had baked and vacuum-sealed before Freya left for the semester. She took a bite of her sandwich, savoring the taste of home when she felt it. Eyes, not the usual curious glances from passing students wondering what bizarre thing the human was eating today. This was different. Focused, intense, the kind of stare that made the hair on the back of your neck stand up and your hindbrain start screaming about being watched by something with more teeth than you. Freya looked up slowly, scanning the cafeteria, and found the source. Across the safety barrier, in the predator section, sat the smallest, fluffiest, and most pathetic-looking apex predator she'd ever seen. The Quillith cub couldn't have been more than the equivalent of a human 6-year-old. Its crystalline fur, which should have been shimmering with confident blues and greens, was a dull, listless gray. 6 eyes, arranged in 2 rows of 3, were locked onto Freya's lunch with an intensity that would have been terrifying if the creature wasn't so obviously, heartbreakingly alone. Quillith were legendary. Wolf-like in build but twice the size when fully grown, with fur that wasn't really fur at all, but millions of tiny crystal filaments that changed color based on emotion and environmental factors. They had retractable claws that could slice through starship hull plating, jaws strong enough to crush bone, and a pack mentality so fierce that insulting one Quillith meant fighting all of them. This little one sat by itself at a table clearly meant for 8, its crystalline coat rippling between gray and a sickly yellow that Freya's xenobiology textbook had labeled as extreme distress or isolation. Their eyes met. The cub's fur flickered, just for a moment, to a hopeful orange. Freya looked down at her sandwich, then back at the cub, then at the holographic barrier between them with its 17 posted warnings about maintaining species separation during meal times. She thought about her textbooks, her safety training, the three separate orientations that had all emphasized in increasingly stern tones that humans should absolutely not interact with predator species without proper supervision and safety protocols. Then she thought about being 8 years old, new at school, sitting alone in the cafeteria while everyone else had their friend groups and inside jokes. "This is stupid," she muttered to herself, which was usually what she said right before doing something spectacularly stupid. She picked up one of her chocolate chip cookies, checked to make sure no faculty members were watching, and tossed it over the barrier. The holographic field rippled as the cookie passed through. Time seemed to slow. The cookie arced through the air in a perfect parabola, tumbling end over end, and the cub's 6 eyes tracked it with the precision of a targeting computer. It snatched the cookie out of the air with reflexes that reminded Freya exactly why Huolith were apex predators. The cookie disappeared into its mouth in one bite, and the cub's entire body went rigid, eyes wide, fur exploding into a brilliant, shocked gold. For 3 heartbeats, neither of them moved. Then the cub made a sound somewhere between a purr and a whimper, and its fur shifted to the most vivid, delighted pink Freya had ever seen. It shuffled closer to the barrier, not quite touching it, but clearly wanting more. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me," Freya whispered, but she was already breaking off half of her sandwich. "This is how I die. Expelled for feeding the wildlife. My mom's going to kill me before the Quillith do." She tossed the sandwich half over the barrier. The cub caught it, devoured it in 3 massive bites, and made that purr-whimper sound again. Louder this time. Its tail, a magnificent crystalline plume, started wagging so hard its entire back end shook. Freya couldn't help it. She laughed. That was, apparently, the signal for the universe to remind her that actions have consequences. "Human," a voice said from behind her, cold and precise. "You are aware of the dietary segregation protocols, yes?" Freya turned to find a Mentaleth student looming over her table. The Mentaleth were telepathic, prey species, and deeply, philosophically opposed to anything with sharp teeth. This one was tall, willowy, with skin that shifted through shades of blue and green like oil on water. Its name tag read Quell, and its expression read, "You're making a terrible mistake." "I'm just sharing my lunch," Freya said, trying for innocent and landing somewhere around defiant. "With a Quillith." Quell's mental voice pressed against Freya's thoughts, not quite intrusive, but definitely judgmental. A predator species known for their pack bonds and interesting interpretations of debt and honor. "It's a kid sitting alone. I gave it a cookie. It's not a marriage proposal." "To them?" Quell gestured at the cub, who was now pressed against the barrier, all 6 eyes fixed on Freya's remaining apple slices. "It might as well be." Before Freya could respond, several things happened at once. First, the cafeteria got very, very quiet. That particular quality of silence that meant something bad was about to happen. Second, students started pulling out their communication devices, recording, because, of course, they were. Third, and most importantly, a shadow fell across Freya's table. She looked up, and up, and up, until she was staring into the 6 eyes of a fully grown Quillith that had somehow crossed into the human section without anyone noticing. Its crystalline fur was a deep, dangerous red, the color of warning and barely controlled aggression. It stood nearly 3 meters tall at the shoulder, with claws that gouged small furrows in the metal floor as it walked. The cub squeaked and pressed itself against the barrier from the other side, fur flickering between embarrassed purple and guilty yellow. Freya's brain went into full panic mode, cycling through her options at light speed. Run? Too slow. Scream? Undignified and useless. Apologize? Do Quillith even accept apologies, or do they just eat you? The massive Quillith leaned down, bringing its face level with Freya's, close enough that she could see her reflection in its crystalline fur. Could smell something like ozone and winter mornings. Its breath fogged in the air between them despite the climate-controlled environment. It looked at Freya, then at the cub, then at the remaining food on Freya's tray. Then it made a sound, a series of clicks and rumbles that Freya's translator struggled to process. The closest approximation that appeared on her heads-up display was observing, acknowledging, approving. The red in its fur softened to a warm amber. It touched its massive head to the barrier where the cub sat, a gesture so gentle it made Freya's heart ache. Then it looked back at Freya, made another clicking sound that translated as "Pack remembers kindness," and turned to leave. The cub's fur exploded into happy pink again, and it made a sound that was definitely a goodbye, mixed with a promise. The adult Quillith, who Freya would later learn was called Fang, paused at the edge of the human section. It looked back one more time, its 6 eyes meeting Freya's too, and its fur rippled with colors she didn't have names for. Then it was gone, leading the cub back to the predator section with a tail swish that seemed almost amused. Freya sat frozen for a full minute, her heart hammering, adrenaline making her hands shake. Around her, the cafeteria slowly returned to normal volume, conversations resuming with an undercurrent of excited gossip. Quell was still standing beside her table, and if Freya wasn't mistaken, the Mentaleth looked actually impressed. "You just fed a Quillith cub and survived an adult's inspection. Humans are either the bravest species in the galaxy or the dumbest. I haven't decided which." "Can't it be both?" Freya managed, her voice only shaking a little. "Unfortunately for the rest of us," Quell said, something almost like respect in their mental tone, "I suspect it can." Freya looked down at her decimated lunch, at the 2 remaining apple slices and 1 lonely cookie. She wrapped them up carefully, suddenly not hungry anymore, her mind replaying that moment when Fang's eyes had met hers. Pack remembers kindness. "It was just lunch," she whispered to herself. "Just sharing lunch with a lonely kid, that's all." But as she gathered her things and headed to her next class, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just done something that would have consequences far beyond a shared sandwich and some cookies. She had no idea how right she was. Tomorrow was going to be very, very interesting. Freya's morning started normally enough, which should have been her first clue that the universe was about to punch her in the face. Again. She'd overslept by 15 minutes, burned her tongue on 2 hot coffee, and her hair had decided that today was the day it would rebel against all known physics. But she made it to advanced biochemical interactions with 3 minutes to spare, which by her standards was practically early. The classroom was on the 3rd level of the academic wing, a nice amphitheater-style space with seats arranged in a semicircle around the demonstration area. Freya's usual spot was middle row, slightly left of center, close enough to see the holodisplays, but far enough back that she could eat snacks without Dr. Melenth noticing. She walked through the entrance, already pulling out her datapad, and stopped so abruptly that a Flither student behind her squawked in protest and had to swerve around her with an irritated flutter of wings. Her seat wasn't just occupied, it was fortified. 6 full-grown Quillith formed a protective semicircle around her usual chair, their massive bodies creating a living barrier of crystalline fur and barely contained lethality. 3 cubs, including Whisper, sat in front of them, smaller but no less serious. The entire pack's fur rippled with attentive blue, the color of focus and duty. And sitting in the exact center of this apex predator formation, looking ridiculously tiny and out of place, was her empty chair. The classroom was in chaos. Half the students, mostly prey species, had refused to enter and were pressed against the hallway walls, peering in with expressions ranging from terror to morbid curiosity. The other half, the braver or more foolish ones, had taken seats as far away from the couloir as physically possible, which meant they were all crammed into the back 3 rows like sardines. Dr. Malanth, a floating gas being whose body looked like someone had captured a small nebula and given it consciousness, was hovering near the demonstration area, their containment field pulsing with agitated purple clouds. "This is highly irregular." Dr. Malanth's voice echoed through the room, a sound like wind chimes in a thunderstorm. "You cannot simply claim seats in my classroom without being registered students. There are protocols, procedures, forms to fill out, in triplicate." Fang, who Freya now recognized as the largest of the adult Kulith, rose to his full impressive height. When he spoke, his voice was deep and rumbling, like rocks grinding together in an avalanche. His translator struggled with the Kulith language, breaking it into stilted, separated words. Human, Freya, showed, kindness, to, small one. Fang's massive head swung toward Whisper, who sat up straighter, fur glowing with pride. "With guard, guard?" Dr. Malanth's containment field flickered with confusion. "Guard against what? This is a biochemistry class, not a combat zone." "Pack debt," Fang said, and his fur rippled with absolute certainty, a color like sunset on steel. "Must repay." Freya finally found her voice. Hi, everyone. This is unexpected." 9 Kulith heads turned in perfect synchronization to look at her. 18 eyes, ranging from cub curious to adult protective, locked onto her with an intensity that made her want to either run or hug something. Possibly both. Whisper made an excited, chirping sound, and his fur went bright, happy pink. "Freya," Dr. Malanth said, and there was a note of desperate hope in their wind chime voice. "Please tell me you can explain this. Please tell me you have some logical reason why an entire Kulith pack has decided to turn my classroom into a den." "I gave Whisper half my sandwich yesterday," Freya offered weakly. "And some cookies." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Quell, who had somehow managed to slip into the classroom and take a seat in the danger zone, made a sound that might have been a laugh, or might have been a telepathic scream. It was hard to tell with Mentalith. "You initiated a pack debt," Quell said, their mental voice pressing into everyone's minds with the weight of terrible realization, with food sharing. "Do you have any idea what that means in Kulith culture?" "I'm starting to get the picture," Freya muttered. Fang made that clicking sound again, the one that translated loosely as approval. "Human, Freya, saw, small one, alone, hungry, shared, food, like pack does." His fur shifted to a color that Freya's xenobiology training identified as deep respect mixed with protective determination. "We treat human, Freya, like pack, now, guard, protect, until debt repaid." "And how long does that take?" Freya asked, though she suspected she wouldn't like the answer. "Varies," Fang rumbled. "Minimum 6 moon cycles." 6 months? Freya's voice came out as a squeak. "I gave him a cookie. 1 cookie. Well, okay, one cookie and half a sandwich, and some apple slices. But still, pack det, not about amount, Fang explained patiently, like he was talking to a particularly slow cub. About meaning you fed pack young when no pack present, that is sacred trust. Dr. Malanth made a sound like a sigh filtered through a windstorm. Very well, Freya, please take your seat so we can at least attempt to have a class today. The rest of you, Quilith included, are expected to maintain proper classroom decorum. No growling, no threatening behavior, and absolutely no eating your classmates, no matter how much biochemistry is involved. Freya walked down the aisle, acutely aware that every eye in the room was tracking her movement. The Qualith pack parted smoothly, creating a path to her seat with the precision of a military formation. She sat down, and they closed ranks around her again. A living wall of crystalline fur and protective instinct. Whisper immediately plopped down at her feet, curling into a ball of contented pink fluff. "This is fine," Freya whispered to herself. "This is totally normal. Just another day at Space University with my personal honor guard of apex predators. Mom would be so proud." Dr. Malanth began the lecture, something about enzymatic reactions in multicarbon-based life forms, but Freya could barely concentrate. Every time she moved, even slightly, at least 3 Quilith heads would swivel to check on her. When she pulled out her datapad, one of the adult females, her fur a gentle maternal blue, nudged it closer with her snout, helpfully adjusting the angle for better viewing. Class ended 90 minutes later, though it felt like 6 hours. Half the students fled the moment Dr. Malanth dismissed them. The other half lingered, staring, recording, whispering into their communication devices. Freya stood, hoping that maybe, just maybe, this was a one-time thing. The pack stood with her. "Oh no," she said. "Oh yes," Quell said, appearing at her elbow with the kind of timing that suggested they'd been waiting for maximum dramatic effect. "Pack det means pack protection. Everywhere. All the time." Everywhere? Everywhere. The next 3 days were, without question, the weirdest of Freya's life, and she'd once accidentally teleported herself into a waste recycling unit, so the bar was already pretty high. The Quilith followed her to the library. All 9 of them. They couldn't fit through the doors properly, so they took turns waiting outside while 2 adults and all 3 cubs accompanied her inside. When Freya needed a book from the upper shelves, one of the adults, a male with fur that flickered between scholarly green and protective blue, carefully lifted the book down with his teeth and placed it on her table. The librarian, a flither with anxiety issues and excellent survival instincts, took one look at the situation and declared a special accommodation period where Freya could keep books as long as she needed. Possibly forever. Please, just don't let the predators damage the rare manuscripts. They followed her to the gymnasium for mandatory physical training. The instructor, a muscular Drell moth, who normally spent the entire class period yelling about proper form and weak cores, took one look at Fang and suddenly discovered a desperate need to review safety protocols, in whispers, from the other side of the gym. When Freya did her stretches, the cubs mimicked her, creating a bizarre yoga class of 1 human and 3 apex predator children. When she ran laps, they loped alongside her, easily keeping pace while barely trying. When she attempted pull-ups, an adult Quilith positioned itself beneath the bar, ready to catch her if she fell. She didn't fall, but it was nice to know she wouldn't die if she did. The cafeteria became an absolute circus. Freya's usual table in the human section now hosted a full Quilith pack, and the holographic barriers had been hastily reconfigured to accommodate the mixed-species seating arrangement. She ate her lunch, a simple salad and protein bar, while surrounded by her honor guard. Other students gave her a wide berth. Some stared openly. Others took pictures, recorded videos, posted on galactic social networks with hashtags like HumanPackMom and Death Puppy Guard and How to Get Eaten in for Easy Steps. Whisper always sat closest, his head resting on her knee, occasionally making that purr-whimper sound when she shared bits of her food. The other cubs weren't far behind, learning quickly that the human had excellent snacks and was willing to share. On the third day, Quell joined her at lunch, settling across from her with the kind of deliberate calm that suggested they were either very brave or had made peace with their mortality. "You're still alive," Quell observed. "I'm as surprised as you are." "The Galactic Council is getting involved." Freya paused mid-bite. "What?" "Station security can't remove them. They've broken no laws, violated no regulations. They're just accompanying a fellow student, very enthusiastically." Quell's mental voice carried an edge of concern. "But there are political implications. The predator and prey coalitions are both watching this situation very closely." "Because I shared my lunch with a kid?" "Because you proved that predators can show gratitude and loyalty to prey-adjacent species. That threatens a lot of carefully maintained power structures." Freya looked down at Whisper, who gazed back with 6 trusting eyes, his fur a contented blue. "I didn't ask for this," she said quietly. "No," Quell agreed. "You just fed a hungry child. But sometimes that's all it takes to change the galaxy." Fang, who had been watching the entire exchange, made a low, rumbling sound. His translator rendered it as, "Change is coming. Weather, galaxy, ready or not." And Freya, sitting in a cafeteria on a space station billions of kilometers from Earth, surrounded by apex predators who had adopted her because she'd been kind to one lonely cub, realized that her simple act of sharing lunch was about to become very, very complicated. The summons from the administration hall arrived the next morning. Things were about to get worse before they got better. The administration hall was the kind of building designed to make you feel small and insignificant, which Freya supposed was the point. Towering ceilings, walls of polished metal that reflected your anxious face back at you, and enough empty space to echo every nervous footstep you took. Very welcoming, really put you at ease. Freya walked through the massive entrance doors, flanked by her now constant companions. The Quelith pack had wanted to come inside with her, all 9 of them, but the security scanners had other ideas. After 15 minutes of negotiation, compromise, and one low-level security guard having what appeared to be a minor breakdown, they'd agreed that Fang could accompany Freya while the rest waited outside. The hallway to the High Arbiter's office was long enough to film a dramatic slow-motion walk, and Freya's footsteps seemed unreasonably loud against the pristine floor. Fang walked beside her, his crystalline fur a steady, calm blue that helped settle her nerves, slightly. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "I can handle whatever bureaucratic nonsense they throw at me." Fang made a sound like rocks chuckling. "Human, Freya, faces, authority, alone, no, pack, stands, together. I'm not actually part of your pack, you know. I just gave Whisper a cookie. Cookie was gateway to pack bond." Fang's fur flickered with something that might have been amusement. "Humans do not understand, own actions, very entertaining." Before Freya could argue that she understood her actions perfectly well, "Thank you very much," they arrived at a set of doors that were probably compensating for something. Massive, innate, covered in inscriptions from 100 different languages, all basically saying the same thing. Important people beyond this point prepare to be intimidated. The doors opened automatically, because of course they did, and Freya stepped into an office that looked like someone had tried to fit an entire government building into a single room. High Arbiter Nomdalish sat, or rather hovered, behind a desk the size of a small spacecraft. He was insectoid, all chitinous plates and compound eyes, with mandibles that clicked constantly in what Freya's translator identified as bureaucratic irritation. His exoskeleton was a deep, official-looking black with gold accents that screamed, "I have authority and 17 advanced degrees, and I'm not afraid to use either." "Student Freya," Nomdalesh said, his voice surprisingly high-pitched for someone so imposing. "And uninvited guest." He gestured at Fang with one of his 6 legs. "Pack, guard, goes, where, human, goes," Fang rumbled, settling into a sitting position that still put his head level with Nomdalesh's desk. The High Arbiter's mandibles clicked faster, a sound like an angry typewriter. "Yes, about that. We need to discuss this situation. If this is about my pack following me to classes, the library, and the cafeteria," Freya said, trying to sound more confident than she felt, "they're not breaking any rules. I checked." "Oh, you checked the regulations. How thorough." Nomdalesh's sarcasm could have stripped paint. "Tell me, did you also check the section on political ramifications of cross-species cultural exchanges during active treaty negotiations?" Freya blinked. "The what now?" Nomdalesh stood, all 6 legs clicking against the floor as he moved around the desk. "Let me educate you on the current political situation, since your xenobiology studies apparently didn't cover galactic diplomacy." He activated a holo display, and suddenly the room was filled with star charts, delegation rosters, and enough legal documents to kill a small planet. "Nexus Prime," he began, in the tone of someone explaining something to a particularly slow child, "is currently hosting treaty negotiations between the Predator Coalition and the Prey Alliance. These negotiations have been in progress for 6 cycles and are, to put it mildly, delicate." The holo display shifted, showing representatives from both coalitions. Freya recognized some of the species from her classes: Drelmoth, Flither, Mentalith, and yes, Quilith. The treaty aims to establish new trade routes, resource-sharing agreements, and mutual defense pacts, Nomdalesh continued. It represents decades of work, countless compromises, and the hope for a more unified galactic community. "That sounds great," Freya said slowly. "So what's the problem?" "The problem," Nomdalesh's mandibles clicked like gunfire, "is you. Or rather, your little lunch-sharing incident and its consequences." The holo display changed again, showing footage that made Freya's stomach drop. It was her, in the cafeteria, tossing a cookie to Whisper. Then clips of the pack following her around campus. Then news reports from a dozen different networks, all with sensational headlines. "Predator species shows subservience to mid-tier human," read one. "Quelith pack bonds indicate domestication possibility," claimed another. "Are apex predators going soft?" asked a third. "Oh," Freya said weakly. "Oh, indeed." Nomdalesh dismissed the holo display with a sharp gesture. "The Predator Coalition is furious. They see the Quelith Pack's behavior as weakness, as submission to a species that shouldn't command such loyalty. It makes them look unreliable, soft, potentially vulnerable." "That's not what this is," Freya protested. "They're just repaying what they see as a debt. It's cultural, not political." "And the Prey Alliance," Nomdalesh continued as if she hadn't spoken, is equally upset, though for different reasons. They see this as proof that predators can be tamed, controlled, made docile through the right approach. Some of their more radical members are already proposing new initiatives based on this incident. Fang's fur rippled with dangerous red. Quelith, not tamed, not docile, not weak. Try telling that to the delegations currently threatening to walk away from the treaty table, Nom de Lesh snapped. Both sides are using your situation as ammunition. The predators are insulted. The prey are emboldened. And the treaty that could bring peace and prosperity to 18 star systems is collapsing because a human student couldn't resist playing with the wildlife. The words hit like a slap. Freya felt her face flush with anger and shame in equal measure. I didn't play with anything. I saw a kid sitting alone, and I shared my food. That's it. That's the whole story. Intent doesn't matter. Impact does. Nom de Lesh returned to his desk, his movements sharp and precise. Which brings me to the solution. Solution? You will make a public statement rejecting the Pack's protection. You will explain that it was a misunderstanding, that you meant no offense to Quelith culture, and that you request they cease their guard duties immediately. Nom de Lesh pulled up a prepared statement on his holo display. I've already written it for you. Simple, diplomatic, and it should calm both coalitions enough to salvage the treaty. Freya read the statement, her anger building with each word. It was sanitized, apologetic, and completely wrong. It painted her as ignorant and the Quelith as misguided. It reduced Whisper's loneliness and Fang's honor to political inconvenience. No, she said. Nom de Lesh's mandibles stopped clicking. Excuse me? I said no. I won't read this. I won't reject them. Student Freya, perhaps you don't understand the consequences. I understand perfectly. Freya stood, her hands clenched at her sides. You want me to humiliate Fang and his pack, to tell them their cultural values don't matter, that their sense of honor and debt is just an inconvenience to your political theater. I won't do it. Then you leave me no choice. Nom de Lesh's voice went cold. You will be expelled from the Galactic Learning Institute, effective immediately. Furthermore, I will recommend your deportation from Nexus Prime and a permanent ban from all Coalition-affiliated educational facilities. The room went very quiet. Fang rose to his full height, his fur blazing with protective red. You threaten Pack member. That is declaration of Fang. Wait. Freya put a hand on his crystalline shoulder, feeling the tension thrumming through him. Give me a moment. She turned back to Nom de Lesh, her mind racing. There had to be another way, some angle she wasn't seeing. The treaty was important, she understood that. But so was this. Whatever this had become between her and the Quelith pack. An idea began to form, crazy and probably doomed, but better than either surrendering or getting expelled. What if there was a third option? She said slowly. Nom de Lesh's compound eyes fixed on her. I'm listening. What if this isn't about weakness or control? What if it's about something both coalitions claim to want, but never actually practice? Which is? Mutual respect between species. Freya felt the idea solidifying as she spoke. Think about it. The whole treaty is based on the concept that predators and prey can coexist, can work together, can build something better than constant conflict. But nobody actually believes it. Everyone's just playing political games, maintaining their power structures, keeping their coalitions separate. That's an oversimplification, is it? When was the last time a predator species and a prey species genuinely cooperated on something that didn't have political strings attached? When did anyone actually try to understand another species' culture instead of just negotiating around it? Nom de Lesh was silent. I didn't reject the pack because I respect what this means to them, Freya continued. And they're protecting me because I showed kindness when no one else would. That's not weakness on either side. That's actually exactly what the treaty is supposed to encourage. You want to reframe a political incident as a cultural success story, Nom de Lesh said flatly. I want to show both coalitions that what they're negotiating for can actually work. But it requires someone to go first, to be vulnerable, to trust. Freya took a breath. Let me address both delegations. Let me tell them what really happened and what it means. Absolutely not. You're a student, not a diplomat. She is Pack, Fang rumbled. Pack speaks truth always. And there's something else, a new voice said. Freya turned to find Quell standing in the doorway, their blue-green skin shimmering with determination. Quell, Nom de Lesh said with obvious displeasure. This is a private meeting, which is now a public concern. Quell moved into the room, and Freya noticed they weren't alone. Behind them stood at least 20 students, a mix of species, all wearing expressions of stubborn solidarity. We've been talking, sharing stories, comparing notes. About what? About how the segregation protocols, the dietary separation, the species-based, housing, all of it. It's not keeping us safe. It's keeping us afraid. Quell looked at Freya. What you did, sharing lunch with Whisper, it was simple, kind, and it scared the administration because it proved we don't actually need all these barriers. One of the Flither students stepped forward, feathers ruffled with nervous courage. I've been here 3 cycles, and I've never had a real conversation with a predator species, not because they're dangerous, but because we are taught to be separate. And we're taught that prey species are weak, not worth our time, added a young Drellmoth, their scales flushed with embarrassment. But that's garbage. Some of the smartest beings I've met here are Mentalith, Flither, species the Predator Coalition dismisses. Nom de Lesh looked like he wanted to climb under his desk and hide. This is highly irregular. All of you should be in class. Let her speak to the delegations, Quell said firmly. Let Freya show them what actual cooperation looks like. If the treaty falls apart because of one honest act of kindness, then maybe it deserves to fall apart. Freya stared at the assembled students, feeling something tight in her chest loosen slightly. She wasn't alone in this. Somehow, without meaning to, she'd started something that mattered to more than just her and the Quillith pack. Nom de Lesh's mandibles clicked rapidly, the sound of a bureaucrat calculating political risks and potential outcomes. Finally, he slumped slightly in his chair. This is going to be a disaster, he muttered. Fine. You can address the delegations, both of them, together in public forum. But if this goes wrong, if the treaty collapses, it's on your head. All of your heads. When? Freya asked. Tomorrow, main forum, midday. And for the sake of galactic peace, prepare something better than I shared my lunch. As they left the office, surrounded by students and pack members, Freya felt the weight of what she'd just agreed to settle on her shoulders. She had less than a day to prepare a speech that might determine the future of interspecies relations. No pressure. Fang walked beside her, his fur a steady, confident blue. You will speak. Truth. Truth is strength. I hope you're right, Freya said. Pack is always right, Fang rumbled, and his fur flickered with what was definitely amusement. Freya couldn't help it. She laughed. Tomorrow, she would stand before the most powerful political coalitions in the galaxy and try to explain why sharing a cookie mattered. Tonight, she needed to figure out what the hell she was going to say. The main forum was packed, standing room only, if you were the kind of species that stood, floating room only for the others. The air practically vibrated with tension, curiosity, and what Freya suspected was a healthy dose of people hoping to witness a spectacular disaster. Both coalition delegations sat in their respective sections, separated by tradition and mutual suspicion. Security forces lined the walls just in case someone decided diplomacy was overrated. Freya stood at the podium, flanked by Fang on one side and Quell on the other. Her hands were shaking, so she gripped the edges of the podium hard enough to hurt. She'd stayed up all night preparing a speech. Eloquent points about cultural exchange, carefully researched statistics about successful interspecies cooperation, quotes from famous galactic philosophers. She'd practiced it 8 times. Now, looking at the hundreds of faces, scales, compound eyes, and various sensory organs all focused on her, every word of that speech evaporated from her brain. So she did what humans do best when cornered. She winged it. "I'm not a diplomat," she started, her voice cracking slightly. "I'm a xenobiology student who's barely passing quantum mechanics and once set fire to a lab because I mixed the wrong chemicals. I have no business standing here, talking to people way more important than me." Someone in the Prey Alliance section made a sound that might have been agreement. "But here's what I know. 3 weeks ago, I saw a kid sitting alone in the cafeteria. He was small, scared, and clearly lonely. And I've been that kid, the one nobody sits with, the one who eats lunch wondering if anyone would notice if you just stopped showing up." Freya's throat tightened, but she pushed through. "So I shared my lunch. A sandwich, some cookies, apple slices, basic stuff. I didn't think about politics or coalitions or treaties. I just thought, there's someone hungry, and I have food. That's it." She gestured to Whisper, who sat at the front with the other cubs, his fur a nervous yellow-green. Whisper didn't see a human, a mid-tier species that doesn't fit neatly into predator or prey categories. He just saw someone who was kind when he needed it. And Fang and his pack, they didn't see an opportunity for political gain. They saw an action that aligned with their deepest cultural values, and they responded with honor. Fang's fur rippled with proud blue. "You're all negotiating a treaty about cooperation, about working together, about building something better than fear and separation. But you don't actually believe it can work, do you? Because if you did, you wouldn't need barriers in the cafeteria. You wouldn't need species-segregated housing. You wouldn't be shocked that a predator and a prey species student are standing here together, supporting each other." Quell's skin shimmered with determined green. "I'm not saying the barriers should come down tomorrow. I'm not saying centuries of evolution and instinct can be ignored. But maybe, just maybe, we could start small. Share a meal, have a conversation. See each other as individuals first, species second." The room was silent. Then Quell stepped forward, their mental voice pressing gently into everyone's minds. "I was terrified of Freya's pack guard at first. Quillith are predators, Mentalith are prey. That's how it's always been. But I watched them protect her, not because she's weak, but because she showed compassion. That changed how I see them." Fang rose, his massive form drawing every eye. Quelith, value, strength, always, but true strength is not just claws and teeth. True strength is choosing kindness when easier to walk away. Human Freya has that strength. A flithered delegate, her feathers puffed with agitation, stood. This is very touching, but one incident doesn't change biological imperatives. Predators hunt, prey flee. That's nature. Nature, Freya said quietly, also gave humans barely any claws, pathetic teeth, and skin that sunburns if we look at a star wrong. By nature's standards, we should be extinct. But we're not, because we adapted. We cooperated. We chose to be more than our biology dictated. She pulled out her lunch bag, the same one she'd carried that first day. From it, she took out a cookie, walked to the barrier between the coalition sections, and held it up. This is a chocolate chip cookie. My mom made it. It's just flour, sugar, chocolate, and love. No politics, no hidden agenda, just food meant to be shared. She broke the cookie in half, offering one piece toward the Prey Alliance, one toward the Predator Coalition. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then a young Drellmoth delegate, scales flushed with courage, stood and walked forward. He took half the cookie, examined it, then ate it. His expression shifted to surprise. "That's actually good," he said. A Flither student, one who'd been in the hallway watching that first day, fluttered down and took the other half. She nibbled it cautiously, then chirped with delight. And just like that, the dam broke. Students started moving toward each other, crossing the invisible lines that had always kept them separate. Not all of them, not even most of them, but enough. Enough to matter. The delegations watched, some with horror, some with hope, some with expressions too complex to read. High Arbiter Nomdalesh, watching from the administrative section, made a note on his datapad. The treaty wouldn't be signed today, but maybe, just maybe, it wouldn't completely fall apart either. Freya returned to the podium, her heart hammering. "I can't promise this will be easy," she said. "I can't promise everyone will get along. But I can promise that if a human with anxiety and a Quillith cub can bridge the gap over a cookie, then maybe the rest of you can too. Start small, share lunch, learn a name, see what happens." She stepped back, convinced she'd just delivered the most awkward, rambling speech in diplomatic history. The applause started slowly, then built. A wave of sound from dozens of different species, each clapping or clicking or humming in their own way. Whisper bounded up to her, fur blazing happy pink, and head-butted her leg with enough force to nearly knock her over. Fang touched his massive head to hers gently, a gesture of pack approval. Quell's mental voice whispered privately, "Not bad, for a human who set a lab on fire." Weeks later, the cafeteria barriers were still there, but students sat closer now, ventured across the lines more often. A shared lunch program started, voluntary and small, but growing. The treaty negotiations continued, slower but steadier, with a new clause being drafted. The Freya Protocol, encouraging cultural exchange at the individual level. And in the cafeteria, at table 63, a human sat with a Quillith cub on one side and a Mentalith student on the other. When a nervous Flither approached, asking if the seat was taken, Freya smiled and pushed out a chair. "Always room for one more. Because that's how you change the galaxy. Not with grand speeches or political maneuvering, but with small acts of kindness, one shared lunch at a time. And if there's one thing humans excel at, it's being beautifully, chaotically, impossibly kind when the universe least expects it.